There is a man in the Bible who walked so closely with God that death never touched him. He didn't die. He didn't get sick. He didn't grow old and fade away like everyone else. One day he was walking with God, and the next day he was simply gone because God took him. His name was Enoch, and the book he left behind, the one that carries his visions, his warnings, and his encounters with heaven, was removed from most of our Bibles. Think about that for a second. A man who walked so intimately with God that heaven itself opened its doors to him, and somewhere along the way, someone decided his writings were too much, too revealing, too dangerous for the crowd. Why? Because in that book, Enoch saw something 11 times. 11 separate visions, 11 specific encounters. And what he saw was not the fall of empires or the end of kingdoms. What he saw was you. He saw the chosen ones, the ones God had set apart before they ever drew breath, the ones who would carry a mark in their spirit that the world would never understand. And that vision, that single repeating image of the chosen scattered across the earth, was the reason his book was quietly pushed out of the canon. I want you to stay with me, because what I'm about to share is not theory. It's not speculation. It's the very thing Enoch saw, the very thing the early church knew, and the very thing someone did not want ordinary believers to discover. If you have ever felt like you were born into the wrong family, if you have ever looked around at your own life and wondered why nothing ever felt like it truly belonged to you, there is a reason. And Enoch wrote about that reason 11 times. Let me take you back. Enoch was the 7th from Adam. 7, the number of completion, the number of divine perfection. And the scripture says something about him that it says about almost no one else in the entire Old Testament. It says he walked with God. Not that he prayed, not that he served, not that he obeyed. It says he walked with God. Like two friends on a road at sunset, like a father and a son on a quiet path. That kind of nearness, that kind of intimacy. And because he walked that close, heaven started showing him things. Things that were not written for the masses. Things that were written for the ones who would come later. The ones who would be hunted, misunderstood, isolated, and marked by something they couldn't even explain. In the book of Enoch, the one removed there, is a phrase that repeats 11 times. The phrase is, the chosen or the elect. Sometimes it says, the righteous and the elect. Sometimes it says, the chosen ones of the Lord of Spirits. But every time it appears, Enoch is seeing the same thing. He is seeing a group of people scattered across the ages, carrying something inside them that the rest of the world does not carry. A light, a frequency, a calling that was sealed into them before they were ever born. And here's what most people miss. Enoch did not describe them as religious leaders. He did not describe them as famous prophets. He described them as the hidden ones, the ones who would live quiet lives, the ones who would be rejected by their own families, the ones who would feel foreign in every room they walked into, the ones who would be tested again and again and again, not because God was punishing them, but because God was refining something inside them that the world was going to need in the final hour. Does that sound like you? Because I have met people, good people, sincere people, who have spent their whole lives wondering why they feel the way they feel, why they cry during worship songs that no one else even notices, why they carry other people's pain like it was their own, why they see things in dreams that come true weeks later, why they walk into a room and instantly know something is off, why they have been through things that should have destroyed them, and yet here they are, still standing, still believing, still reaching for God even when their knees are shaking. That is not a coincidence. That is the mark of a chosen one. And Enoch saw it 11 times. Now listen carefully, because this is where it gets real. When the early church fathers sat down to decide what would stay in the Bible and what would be removed, they had a problem. The book of Enoch was quoted by Jude in the New Testament. It was quoted by early Christians. It was read in synagogues. Jesus himself used phrases and imagery that came directly from it. The book was everywhere, but it carried something the religious authorities could not control. It carried the idea that God had already marked certain people, already sealed them, already set them apart before they were ever born. And that idea was dangerous, because if a believer ever truly understood that their calling was sealed before their birth, they would stop begging for permission. They would stop waiting for the approval of men. They would stop shrinking themselves to fit into churches, jobs, and families that were never designed to hold them. So, the book was quietly removed. Not because it was false, but because it was too true. And what Enoch saw, the vision of the chosen ones, repeated 11 times, was buried with it. Let me tell you about a woman I heard about some years ago. She grew up in a small town in the middle of nowhere. Her family did not understand her. Her mother used to say she was too sensitive, too dramatic, too emotional. Her father barely spoke to her. She grew up feeling like a stranger in her own house. And every night, she would lie in bed and whisper to God, "Why did you put me here? Why did you put me with these people? I don't belong here." She carried that question into her 20s, into her 30s. She went to church. She served. She prayed. But the loneliness never fully lifted. And then one day, in the middle of a quiet morning, she opened her Bible to the book of Jeremiah. And she read those words, the ones God said to Jeremiah before he was even born. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." And she broke down, because for the first time in her life, she realized something. She had not been placed in that family by accident. She had been planted there on purpose. She was the one who was supposed to carry the light into a house that had never known it. She was the seed. She was the first. She was the chosen one in a bloodline that had been sleeping for generations. That is what Enoch saw. That is what the removed book describes. That is what heaven has been trying to tell you, maybe for years, maybe for decades, maybe your whole life. You are not a mistake. You are not the problem. You are the answer your family line has been waiting for. And the fact that you feel different is not a curse. It is the evidence of the calling. Think about Joseph for a moment. Joseph had dreams, big dreams, dreams of thrones, of harvests, of stars bowing down to him. And what did his own brothers do with those dreams? They mocked him. They resented him. They plotted against him. They threw him in a pit and sold him into slavery. His own flesh and blood. His own family. Because sometimes the people closest to you cannot see the hand of God on your life. They only see the weight of it. They only see the strangeness of it. They only see how different you are from them, and that difference terrifies them. But Joseph ended up in Egypt, in prison, forgotten, betrayed. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. And yet God was preparing him for a throne. God was building something in him in the darkness that could not have been built in the light. Chosen ones are almost always processed through rejection first. Almost always. Because rejection is the fire that burns off everything that doesn't belong to the calling. Rejection strips you of the need to be liked. Rejection kills the part of you that keeps seeking approval from people who were never assigned to your destiny. And when that part of you finally dies, when you stop trying to explain yourself to people who don't have the eyes to see you, that's when heaven starts moving in a way it never moved before. Enoch saw that too. He saw the chosen ones walking through furnaces of rejection. He saw them standing alone in rooms where no one believed them. He saw them praying in secret, weeping in secret, believing in secret, while the world around them called them too much, too strange, too intense. And he saw something else. He saw heaven watching them, counting every tear, recording every prayer, writing down every time they chose God over the voices that tried to silence them. Variação 3. The calling is wide. The instructions reach only a few. If there is a burning in your spirit right now, do not minimize it. That is the sign. The secret protocol delivers the 7 keys God reserved for those who are ready to unlock what was sealed inside them before birth. The full audiobook is included to absorb in depth in your own time, in the presence of God. And the Awakening Map, the bonus guide that reveals the 5 stages of spiritual awakening and positions you with precision at the exact point of your journey today. Link pinned in the first comment. For a limited time only, because not every door stays open forever. My name is George, and I have spent years of my life studying, praying, and living inside this truth. Not because I read about it in a seminary, but because I lived it. I was that kid who didn't fit. I was that teenager who cried out to God in the dark when no one else understood. I was the adult who walked through doors that closed, through friendships that ended, through seasons that felt like they would never break. And every single time, I came out the other side carrying more of heaven than I went in with. Because that's what the process does to a chosen one. It doesn't destroy you, it unveils you. Now, let me take you back to Enoch one more time, because there is a detail in his writings that almost nobody talks about. When he saw the chosen ones, the 11th time, the final vision, he did not see them scattered anymore. He saw them gathered. He saw them standing together. He saw a company, an army of the ones who had been marked, and over their heads there was a light that the world had never seen. A light that came from the Ancient of Days himself. A light that was not reflected but generated from within them, because the seed that was planted in them before birth had finally broken open. That is the future Enoch saw. And that is the future you were born into. You were not born to live a small life. You were not born to spend your whole existence trying to fit into a world that was designed to reject you. You were born to carry a light that will illuminate rooms no one else can enter. You were born to speak things into existence that no one else can speak. You were born to be a signpost, a living signpost, pointing a confused generation back to the one who never stopped calling them home. Consider Moses. Moses ran from his calling for 40 years. 40. He was raised in a palace, trained in wisdom, educated in languages and warfare, and then one act of passion sent him running into the wilderness. And for 4 decades, he believed he had failed. He believed his calling had expired. He believed God had moved on to someone more reliable, but heaven had not forgotten him. Heaven was waiting for the fire, the burning bush, the moment when everything would finally make sense. And when it came, it did not come in the palace. It did not come in the city. It came in a desert, because chosen ones meet God most powerfully in the places where nobody else is looking. Maybe that is where you are right now. The desert, the waiting place, the season where nothing seems to be moving and nothing seems to be making sense. I want you to hear me. That is not abandonment. That is preparation. The silence is not rejection. The silence is the sound of heaven rearranging things for you behind a veil you cannot see yet. And think about Daniel, a young man carried off into Babylon, taken from his home, taken from his temple, taken from everything that was familiar, and dropped into a foreign kingdom where the food was different, the language was different, and the gods were different. Everything about Daniel's outer life screamed that God had abandoned him. But what was happening on the inside told a different story. Because in that strange kingdom, Daniel started receiving visions that nobody else in history had ever received. Kings were dreaming dreams they couldn't understand, and only Daniel could interpret them. Rulers were watching handwriting appear on palace walls, and only Daniel could read it. He was in exile on the outside, but he was in the throne room of God on the inside. Sometimes, the place that looks like punishment to everyone around you is actually the exact place where heaven opens a door that no other place on earth could open. That is what Enoch saw too. He saw the chosen ones in Babylon. He saw them in exile. He saw them in the middle of systems that were never designed to honor them. And he saw them receiving dreams, interpretations, visions, warnings, directions. Because the chosen ones carry an internal kingdom that does not depend on the kingdom around them. And nothing, no job loss, no broken marriage, no lonely apartment, no season of silence can take that internal kingdom away from you. It was sealed in you before birth. Enoch saw it, and it is still sealed in you tonight. Paul said it this way: "Eye has not seen, ear has not heard, neither has it entered into the heart of man what God has prepared for those who love him." For those who love him, not for the impressive ones, not for the polished ones, for the ones who loved him when nobody was watching, for the ones who kept their faith in the hospital waiting room, in the funeral home, in the empty apartment after the breakup, in the quiet car rides home after another long day. Those are the chosen ones. And Enoch saw them 11 times. Let me tell you what else he saw. He saw that the chosen ones would be tested in ways that would look unfair from the outside. He saw betrayals. He saw sicknesses. He saw losses that would seem to make no sense. And he saw something strange. He saw that every single trial had a purpose. Every single wound had a word attached to it. Every single scar would one day become a map that someone else would use to find their way out of their own pit. Because the chosen are not just called for themselves. They are called for the ones who are still trapped in the dark, waiting for someone to come back and tell them the way out. There is one vision in particular that I cannot forget. Enoch described being led through valleys and mountains he had never seen before. He described rivers of fire and places where the light of God burned so brightly that no shadow could exist. And in the middle of those visions, he kept seeing the same image: a company of people, a gathering of spirits. Men and women who had been hidden in every generation, pressed down, overlooked, forgotten by the history books of men, but known by name in the courts of heaven. He saw them being counted, one by one, each name spoken out loud before the throne. And I want you to sit with that image for a moment, because somewhere in that counting, somewhere in that list of hidden ones, Enoch saw your name was being spoken. Before you were born. Before your parents met, before your bloodline even existed on the earth in its current form, your name was already being recorded in a book that no man can edit and no committee can remove. That is why the enemy does everything he can to make you forget who you are. He does not fight people who don't know their identity. He leaves them alone because they are not a threat. But the moment a chosen one starts waking up, the moment you start remembering that there is something in you older than your pain and bigger than your circumstances, every hell on earth will try to distract you. Loud voices, cluttered thoughts, old memories dragged back into the present on purpose, new offenses designed to pull you off your assignment. And yet, in the middle of all of it, there is a quiet whisper that keeps returning, a voice that will not leave you alone. A voice that says, "You are mine. You were always mine. And I am not finished with you." That is why the enemy fights you so hard. Not because you are weak, because you are dangerous. Because your testimony is a weapon. Because the moment you fully understand who you are, entire bloodlines change. Entire generations shift. Entire cities feel the tremor. Enoch understood that. And when he was taken up, when he walked off the earth alive and stepped into heaven without dying, he left a book behind. A book that was read, a book that was studied, a book that was quoted by Jesus and the apostles. And then, quietly, the book was pushed out of the shelves, hidden, forgotten, dismissed. But God does not lose what he has deposited. And what Enoch saw is still true. The chosen ones are still being called. The mark is still being placed. The light is still burning in the spirits of men and women scattered across the earth right now, maybe in a small town, maybe in a big city, maybe in a hospital room, maybe in a prison cell, maybe sitting right where you are sitting tonight, with headphones on, hearing this message and feeling something rise up inside you that you cannot explain. That rising is not emotion. That rising is recognition. Your spirit is recognizing the sound of its own story being told. So let me ask you the question that matters. If Enoch saw you, if his eyes looked across centuries and landed on your face, what do you think he saw? Do you think he saw a mistake? Do you think he saw someone who was too broken, too late, too damaged to be used? No. He saw a chosen one. He saw you in the final company. He saw you with the light over your head, He saw you standing in the moment when every tear you ever cried finally made sense. That is who you are. And the book they removed was the book that was supposed to tell you. Now the final question. And this one is for you. I want you to think about it carefully, and I want you to answer it in the comments below. Of the 11 times Enoch saw the chosen ones, the scattered ones, the rejected ones, the tested ones, the ones walking through deserts, the ones standing alone in their families, the ones carrying light in secret, the ones gathered at the end, which vision does your life right now match the most? Which one of those descriptions felt like someone was describing your exact story? Write it in the comments. Be specific. Be honest. Because when you name what heaven is doing in you, you agree with it. And when you agree with it, you accelerate it. I'll be reading, and I'll be praying with you. Because if you made it this far, you did not make it this far by accident. You made it this far because something in you is waking up, and it is not going back to sleep.